Hello out there in TV land, and welcome to another edition of Visual Radio. We are honored to have James Montgomery here. James.
I'm honored to be here, and as a matter of fact, my views do, in fact, reflect the views of WCAT and Wakefield. No, I'm just kidding. It's only a joke. But anyway, I'm proud to be here with you. You and I go back a long way, and you're one of the best in the business, so thanks for having me on.
Bless you, young man.
Appreciate it.
Our last adventure was at the Kowloon. You opened for Mitch Ryder?
Oh, yeah.
Or Mitch Ryder opened for you, I don't remember.
Well, no, I opened for Mitch. You know, I go back with Mitch a long way because I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I knew Mitch back then, and I got two funny stories about him, one of which I probably shouldn't tell,
Tell.
Yeah, he was at one of our family Christmas parties and doing something on a table that my mother had no idea what it was. I'll just leave it at that. But anyway, so there was one time when they flew me out to open up for Mitch Ryder at an auto show, and in Detroit it's like rock and roll and automobiles go together. So they said we can only afford you, so put a band together. So Jimmy McCarty, who was the lead guitar player for the Detroit Wheels, was actually a member of the James Montgomery band and lived in the band house out in Hingham. So I called up Jimmy McCarty, and he got Johnny Bedanchik and Billy Fraga. So I opened up for Mitch Ryder, and I had all the original Detroit Wheels in my band, and Mitch didn't have any Detroit Wheels in his band, so it was kind of an interesting thing. And there was bad blood between them at the time, right?
Oh.
And so McCarty and Bedanchik are getting ready to go on stage. Man, we're going to blow this guy away. We're going to blow him away. And I said, boy, I guess I made the right decision, you know. But afterwards, I sat down, because Mitch and I go back away, and McCarty and me, I sat McCarty and Mitch Ryder and Johnny B down and had a beer. I said, you guys aren't leaving this trailer until you shake hands and become friends, which they did. So I love Mitch. Anyway.
He's awesome.
Yeah. That was a fun show, too.
Johnny A. ever play with Johnny B?
Yeah. No, but they'd go well together. Yeah, you know, Johnny A., as we all know, the a guy from now living in Salem, New Hampshire, but a North Shore guy, one of the greatest instrumental guitar players ever, who played in the Peter Wolf Band for a while. And Johnny B., the ultimate rock and roll drummer from Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels. He's now playing with a band called the Howling Diablos out of Detroit, Michigan.
Good for him.
But Johnny A. and Johnny B., you know what? I'm going to make that happen.
Cool. See? This is a think tank. This is just what you know, I was going to give you questions. You said no, and you did the right thing, because we have so much to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like prepared questions.
Johnny A., you know, my friend Bobby Head played on the Yardbirds tour right after he did the Beatles tour.
Right.
And that's when Jeff Beck bolted. So there was only Jimmy Page after like 4 or 5 dates. There was only Jimmy Page. You've got Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, and Johnny A. from the same band.
Yeah. Wow.
The drummer's amazing.
You can't beat that.
No, but to have, you know, what was it, 2018? Because I don't think Johnny's still with them, the Yardbirds.
No.
But he did like 2 years of tours with them, maybe longer.
Yeah, but there was only like, anyway, yeah, he did that for a couple of years.
Yeah, and what a great way to be the Yardbirds to have a Johnny A in it.
Yeah, Johnny A is definitely gifted. Matter of fact, before I came over here, I stopped at an Italian restaurant, had the best eggplant dish I've ever had.
The Wakefield Center?
Yeah. I'll give it a plug. It's Ristorante Italia or something like that. But anyway, Johnny A called me when I was on the way over here. Because we're trying to put something together in late September.
Now, he's been on the radio show, but he's not been on this show. You did radio. Are you still doing radio?
Yeah, I had a radio show that ran for about 5 or 6 years. I was syndicated. I was in a lot of different markets. I interviewed over 110 blues musicians,
including Buddy Guy.
Including Buddy Guy. Most of the musicians on my show I knew going into it, but I had the opportunity to meet a lot of people that I hadn't met. But then I got a call from Johnny Winter to join his band. So once I joined Johnny's band and we started traveling all over the world, I couldn't maintain my radio show anymore. So now it's a podcast.
Oh,
called Backstage with the Blues, and some of the interviews I got were absolutely incredible. I mean, for instance, just off the top of my head, Bobby Rush, who's one of my favorite guys in the world, and still plays the old Chitlin Circuit style blues. He told me that he was a runner at VJ Studios when Jimmy Reed was recording there, and the idea was that when Jimmy came in, you had to record his vocal first and get his harmonica second, because he would start taking a little taste.
okay, of
And
course.
you had to get him, and then when he was no longer able to record, Bobby Rush, who was the runner who used to go out and get, coffee and donuts for the artists at VJ Studios, they would call him in and he would finish the harmonica. He's the harmonica player on Hush Hush. That's not Jimmy Reed. That's Bobby Rush. So anyway,
Hush Hush Rush.
So I have tons of these great stories from the bluesmen themselves, and I think I could actually tell the story of the blues without having a narrator, because I could start with Mojo Buford telling me when I was 7 years old I saw lynching right in front of me, and I could start there and tell the whole history of the blues and have everything, just the words of the blues musicians themselves.
You asked me to bring up Ian Anderson, Jethro Tull.
Oh, the only reason I said that, there's a couple of things, I love Ian Anderson, and I think he's great, and I'm doing a show coming up in New York on the 20th or 21st of August with Marissa Licata, who's a tremendous violinist who toured with Jethro Tull, and she also played violin with Alicia Keys, so she's really good. But the Ian Anderson story, I must have been joking when I told you to mention it, because we were in Europe with Johnny Winter, and the dressing rooms in Europe, they have a big community room and all the bands eat together. The food's great over there, by the way, compared to dressing room food in this country. And anyway, so Johnny meets Ian Anderson, right, Johnny Winter. And Johnny Winter, to me, was the most unique person. I mean, I spent New Year's Eve with Mick Jagger, and I met Bruce Springsteen when he sold 75 tickets. That's how long I go back with Bruce. But
I had Oliver's.
no,
Cask and Flagon.
it was at a coffee house in Pennsylvania. But anyway, so Johnny meets Ian Anderson, right? And the tables, he's as far away from Ian as you and I are, you and Alec, and the bass player goes to Johnny Winter, goes, "Geez, how about that meeting Ian Anderson, huh?" And Johnny goes, "I don't think flute belongs in rock and roll. I think it sucks. I hate that stuff." And he didn't use the word stuff, but I don't let's see, if I can say it. And Ian Anderson's, his fork gets about halfway to his mouth, and he just freezes and looks at Johnny. But it was all, they shook hands, part of his friends, but it was so funny. I hate that stuff. I don't think flute belongs in rock and roll.
So I was going to ask if Tull and Johnny Winter ever did a gig together.
Well, they did.
Actually,
in
really?
Europe, we toured. Well, oh, you mean in the same band? No, I don't.
No. So they were touring together. So
Yeah,
Johnny,
we toured together,
Oh,
yeah.
so Johnny didn't like.
Well, he said it right in front of him was the
Yeah.
funny thing. He didn't wait later on to say to us, I really don't think flute belongs in rock and roll. He said it right after meeting him, But that was Johnny. There was no filter. Johnny Winter was the most real person in a way that I've ever seen, because everything he said he meant. There was no filter on anything. Whatever he felt, he said it. Whatever, as a blues player, arguably one of the greatest blues guitar players who's ever lived, and arguably to this day, maybe the greatest slide guitar player who's ever lived. I mean, my guy George McCann, I rate way up there, but I mean, right now I think we got Bonnie Raitt and Sonny Landreth and Derek Trucks and my guy George McCann. I think they're probably four of the best, but I know I'm forgetting some people, but Johnny was an incredible, even, the thing that was interesting about Johnny when I joined the band, his manager had him on prescription drugs so that he could control him and actually steal from him.
Oh,
And I can say this because it's all in a book. You know, I'm not giving up anything. That's,
which book?
Raising Cain, I think it's called. The Johnny Winter story, written by Maureen Sullivan, or Mary. She's a great gal. But, you know, so when I joined Johnny's band, you know, they wanted me to join to kind of take away the fact that Johnny was like kind of spaced out on all these drugs that they had him on. And after a while, me and Paul Nelson, who became Johnny's manager, he was a guitar tech at the time, we started figuring it out. You know, one step at a time, we could see what was going on. So eventually with Johnny, but even during that period, you know, when we made a record called "I'm a Blues Man," which was nominated for a Grammy. If that would have won, I would have actually gotten a Grammy award. But Johnny never remembered anything about making that record. But eventually, we figured out what was going on, and I was director of a medical program there where we provided free health care for blues musicians. And I got Dr. Larry Hodis, who was chief of staff at Mount Sinai Hospital. And in 8 months, we got Johnny off of every single prescription drugs he was taking, every single one. And then he stopped smoking, he stopped drinking. And I always say the day that Johnny Winter stopped smoking marijuana, I started stocking up. I bought water and I was sure the world was coming to an end because Johnny Winter had stopped smoking marijuana. But the last 5 years of Johnny's life, and thanks in large part to Paul Nelson, who took over where we got started, were the best years of his life. And he became very successful again. You know, his manager used to keep him away from other artists because he didn't want other artists telling him to get away from the management company. So at the end of Johnny's career, he played with Eric Clapton and Carlos Santana. He recorded with Dr. John, and the list goes on and on. Joe Bonamassa. So Johnny's last 5 years, and I always like to set the record straight about this because, you know, the typical blues guy will tell you, oh yeah, Johnny at the end of his life was in really bad shape, but that's not true. His last 5 years, you know, we found out later he had glaucoma, and that's why, you know, he looked a little fragile because he couldn't see. But he was in great shape, and so I always want to set the record straight that Johnny's last 5 years were really good for him.
That was the word I had for him when I saw him at the Paradise. He's so dynamic on stage. Then backstage, he seemed fragile. And people just, you know.
He could have been. I mean, it depends on what period you're talking about. I
don't even remember.
I knew Johnny for 40 years, and you know, I opened up the Frankenstein tour for Edgar, and when Ricky Derringer was in the band, I opened that tour, and that's when I met Johnny. It was back in those days, so Johnny was a lifelong friend, and you know, the last thing I said to him, one of my responsibilities with Johnny was to stay up all night with him, because he was like a vampire. He never traveled in you know.
They only come out at night.
He did, and we were in Santa Cruz, you know, where we were able to stay in the same hotel for 4 or 5 dates, which you love when you're on the road. If you can use one hotel and make the date and come back, you don't have to check in and check out. And it's Santa Cruz. I mean, the babes are at the pool, and then it's the rocky coastline of the Montgomery Peninsula and all this stuff, and it's just gorgeous. And every day I'm down at the pool, hanging out with drinking rum out of a coconut, hanging out with these babes, and I'm looking up and I'm counting. There's one hotel room where the shade is always drawn. 1, 2, 3, 4 floors up, 3 floors over. And I said, that's got to be Johnny's room, right? It's the most beautiful view of the whole tour. And sure enough, when we checked out, I went there just to see, and I said, hey, Johnny, let me open the curtains. You got it? No, I don't want to see the view and everything. So one of my jobs was to stay up all night with Johnny, and you know, we eventually had the blues radio station, satellite station on, and we unconsciously started playing this game to who could guess who the artist is after the first few notes. I think we probably, of the hundreds of blues songs that we listened to, I probably beat Johnny Winter to identify who the artist was 6 times, you know. He could hear the first 2 notes of anything and tell you who that artist was.
Amazing.
He was an amazing guy. I love Johnny.
It was a magical time, early 70s. There'll never be anything like it again. Just the music coming off the radio and going to see these artists play.
Yeah,
just a very special
it really
time.
was a different time. And when I started meeting these blues guys in the late 60s, because, you know, I met Cotton when I was like 16 or 17 by the end, and I do want to talk a little bit about the documentary you're making about James
Absolutely.
Cotton. But, you know, and I met Cotton, I was 16 or 17. And when I met Junior and Buddy, I was probably 17. By the time I was 19, I had played with John Lee Hooker, you know, because I grew up in Detroit, and it was a really lively blues scene back then. And in those days, you could just walk into Muddy's dressing room and say, "Hey, Muddy," and he'd give you the time of day, talk to you about whatever you wanted to talk about. And those days were really those late 60s into the mid-70s, late 70s, really different times, you know. And there's a great movie out called Echoes in the Canyon right now that talks about what was going on in Laurel Canyon in those days. And there's also a great documentary about Paul Butterfield out now called Horn from the Heart that also talks about what was going on in those days. And it was really exciting time for music because people were sharing ideas rapidly. It was like people were absorbing things, you know. You'd hear something, wow. And, you know, Peter Wolf, the first time I met Peter Wolf, he said, who I love, by the way. Peter Wolf is one of the great frontmen of our generation. But the first time I met Peter Wolf, he pulled me aside and said, "James, the amateur copies the professional steals." And you know, and what he meant by that is just what we're talking about. Is in the late 60s and the 70s, there were so many people. I mean, the Beach Boys and the Beatles were stealing from one another, let alone what David Crosby was stealing from Bob Dylan. But you know, but it's stealing in the sense that you make it your own, you know.
And beyond that, they were pushing each other. The Stones would copy the Beatles, but they would take it to another level. Their music was better because they had that competitive thing going on.
Yeah, and I'm sure there had to have been a competitive aspect of it, you know.
Let it bleed, let it be, let it bleed.
Yeah, but at the same time, there was just this like these people in the process of discovering what you could do with blues and rock and roll. It's like there were no limits anymore. You know, once the Beatles and the Beach Boys started recording this stuff with these harmonies and different tracking, and I mean, it became, you know, all of a sudden, you know, it was no longer the 3-minute single where you had to get in and get out, verse, chorus, bridge, 8-bar solo, verse, chorus, and you're done. I mean, that limited music a lot. And of course, in those days, if you had one hit, then you know, It's My Party, and then
Judy's
Turn to Cry, and you know.
And Quincy Jones behind it all.
Yeah, but all of a sudden, it was just that. It was not only competition, but it was that everything was free. It was free. You could play or steal, or everything was. What's the word I'm looking for? Everything was up for grabs. Everything was
Fair game.
fair game. That's exactly the phrase I was looking for, and it was exciting. You know, great period.
We will talk about your documentary,
Yeah.
but I want to go back. Did you have local singles out on your own label before you got signed?
No, I got my college band. I had a band in high school, by the way, which was successful enough that it was the Montgomery Miller Blues Band. We named it modeled after the Goldberg Miller Blues Band that was Steve Miller's when he was in Chicago. And and we did well in the Detroit area. Then I took LSD, and overnight I changed the band from the Montgomery Miller Band to the Great Cosmic Expanding. And then I heard Frank Zappa, and we bought all this Echoplexes and all this stuff. And actually, you know, because of the internet, now people send you stuff from years ago that you didn't even know was there. We got compared, my high school band got compared to Frank Zappa by the Fifth Estate, which was the big music newspaper in town. They said, keep your eye out for the Cosmic Expanding. They carried on in such a way that it reminded us of Frank Zappa. So my high school band is getting compared to Frank Zappa.
And that is now floating around on the web, the document, the paper.
And then, yeah, exactly. And then so during college, I joined this band called the Gold Brothers. I came home for one summer. I was going to BU. And so the band that I joined between, I think, my sophomore and junior year, or junior and senior, I can't remember which. On that tour, we opened up for Iggy Pop and the MC5. And Iggy Pop then was Iggy and the Stooges. But, you know, when the Sex Pistols, you know, they were punky people, don't get me wrong. And they had a real punky philosophy, you know. But all the stuff that they did that made them punks, Iggy Pop did that in front of me in 1969, probably 10 years before the Sex Pistols. But when he dove out into the audience, he didn't dive into a mosh pit. They had those fences that they rolled up with the chicken wire and the slats, you know, to have this much room between the audience and the Iggy dove on those fences to impale himself. And then there was no mosh pit. He was diving off the stage onto fences and stuff.
He was diving onto broken glass.
Yeah, then he'd come up on stage and break some beer bottles and roll around in it. And I'm going, I love this guy. And then the MC5 would come on with Wayne Kramer, kick out the jams, Mother You Know What, and which I can't say on radio, I think, to this day.
Oh, but there is a censored version.
What's that?
There is a censored version.
Yeah.
Kick out the jams, and then they just blank it.
Yeah,
It's
kick
just
out the
nothing.
jams, Mother Jumper. I'll just put it that way. But, you know, and so, you know, so it was a great summer for me. I saw the invention of punk music right in front of me. And then, so I came back.
And those Stooges albums, I was a teenager. I grew up on them.
Yeah.
That stuff.
They were great. And I saw them as a kid because I played the Grandy Ballroom with my high school band. And so then.
Did you know my friend Dick Wagner?
Dick Wagner.
Guitar player for Lou Reed and for Mitch.
Oh, no. The name, that's why. I knew
Not
the
Mitch.
name, but I didn't know the guy.
Dick Wagner was with Lou Reed and Alice Cooper, but Steve Hunter was with Mitch Ryder's Detroit.
Oh,
and
yeah,
Bob
yeah,
Ezrin's first record was that amazing Detroit album.
Yeah. I know those names. Never met two of those guys, but I met the other.
They were amazing. And Steve's still alive. Steve put out a new instrumental album recently.
Oh, that's great.
Steve
man.
Hunter, yeah.
Yeah, oh, cool.
Joe Perry's on it because Hunter and Wagner played on the second Aerosmith album.
Oh, yeah, no kidding, huh?
Oh, yeah, well, we'll talk about it off camera.
Well, yeah.
They're on Train Kept a Rolling.
Yeah.
They're on Train Kept a Rolling in another song. No, is that the first album? That's the first album. Get Your Wings. They're on Get Your Wings. But anyway, this is all fun. I mean, it's the magic.
So anyway, my college band did well enough. You know, we were on the cover of the Boston Globe and all that stuff. Well, I guess that would have been just afterwards. But my college band did well enough that basically 6 months after I graduated from school, I got a six-figure contract from Capricorn Records, the Allman Brothers label, from Phil Walden and Frank Fenner, and you know, so I never really. I just went from my college band to touring with Aerosmith and Allman Brothers, Marshall Tucker, Leonard Skinner, Steve Miller. You know, I actually opened the tour for John McLaughlin and the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and opened for George Carlin and Cheech and Chong, and I mean Bruce Springsteen. I mean, basically everybody, you know. So
I may have asked you before because I've interviewed you before. The demo that got the deal for the Capricorn record. Was there a demo?
No, we didn't need one. We were doing so much business. See, in those days, if you got on stage and your band played great, you could go over better than a headliner. You know, eventually that would be impossible. If you didn't play hit records that the audience knew, they became jaded and they'd say, well, I don't know that tune. I don't know where's the headliner. But in those days, and we got taken off of a lot of tours, we really did. We'd go out with a band for 5 or 6 gigs on a 12 or 15-day tour, and my agent, Barbara Skydell at Premier Talent, would say, well, we're going to have to find you another tour because they don't want you on the show anymore. And that was why, and that's a true story.
Ah, Jimi Hendrix and the Monkees.
Yeah. I would have loved to play with them, and there would have been no way you could have gone over better than those guys. But so, you know, so...
Well, Jimmy got taken off the tour.
What's that?
Jimmy was taken off the Monkees tour.
Oh, he was? Oh, I
Right,
didn't know
he had like
that.
3 or 4 dates, and then they had to get rid of him because he was Jimi Hendrix.
Who's going to go over better than Jimmy, right? Yeah.
Did you ever meet Jimmy?
No, never did. One of the things that would have been on my wish list, you know, I mean, I definitely would have loved to have seen him play or meet him, you know. The guys in my band have, but well, I think all the guys in my band saw him. But you know, I went through a period when Hendrix was pretty big that I stepped back from music for a little bit, and did something that you know, it was personal, so I don't really talk about.
There's the Roller Coaster album. I think I've reviewed a bunch of your records.
Yeah, the Roller Coaster one's called High Roller.
High Roller.
That was our second record on Capricorn. Produced by Tom Dowd, by the way.
Ah.
Who produced Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles and the Allman Brothers. And the album I did after that was produced by Alan Toussaint. So, I mean, I had some good, worked with some really great guys.
Who did the first one?
Skip Drinkwater. And that's kind of a long story, too. And I'll tell it because I don't think Skip will hear this, but we're going to Capricorn. And by the way, eventually, you know, Capricorn's courting us because we're getting asked by Atlantic and Warner Brothers and Capricorn to sign a contract, right? So we looked at Capricorn. We said it's a small label, but they're still distributed by Warner Electric Atlantic. That was a conglomerate. And so we said, well, we'll get the same distribution, but we'll be in a smaller label. We'll get more personal attention.
And you got the Allmans as a backup.
Yeah, and that was the deal. We were forced to tour with the Allman Brothers and Marshall Tucker and Leonard Skinner. I mean,
What's wrong with that? The original Leonard
so
Skinner,
here I am
right?
from Detroit. I grew up in Detroit. My band's from Boston, and I was called a Southern Rocker. I could never figure that out. But anyway, so the funny thing is, so they take us out to dinner at the best restaurant in Macon, Georgia, you know, and I don't know what the bill was, but eventually I did know what the bill was because when the label filed for Chapter 11 or whatever it was, they sent us the bill for that dinner. You know, years later, 4 years later, oh yeah, you owe us for the dinner that we took you out to when we were trying to get you to sign. But
that famous Rolling Stone article on the Osmond Brothers, they didn't realize they were paying for the donuts and coffee
well,
in the recording studio.
Yeah, I tell you, man, it's a crazy mixed up business, man, I'll tell you.
And they impaled the business because the business at least was functional, and now it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, they're selling Whitney Houston albums and Rolling Stones records, and they're not really making it as fun as it was. The new artists might sell more streaming. They might sell more downloads.
It definitely changed. You know, when we last time I had played with Huey Lewis, who I started playing with in San Francisco, when Bill Graham, you know, he loved the Jay Giles band and he loved us. You know, we were very similar in terms of instrumentation and the kind of high energy approach to blues and R&B that we both had. Because I modeled my bands after Paul Butterfield and James Cotton, and those are the two most high energy frontmen that blues has ever seen. Well, Howlin' Wolf, but I mean, Muddy was high energy, but he just stood there. Well, he did some moves that Elvis eventually did, and they wouldn't show him on TV. But a lot of Elvis's hip shaking moves and the leg wiggling stuff. That was all muddy. But anyway, so we always had a high energy band, and I started thinking about Muddy, and I forgot where it was in this conversation. But anyway,
I do have a question.
yeah.
Butterfield, Jimmy Miller produced a live album that he was raving about. He goes, Joe, I did this live album with Butter, and it's never come out. And I'm wondering if we could ever track it down. We used to share an office with him, Burt Padell's office, 1776
Burt
Broadway.
Padell was my guy, man.
You're kidding?
Yeah. No,
We were in that office.
I was with Burt for a while.
Oh, that's too funny because he's
And
Alice
eventually,
Cooper and Butterfield.
Yeah, well, Alice Cooper and I were friendly too because he knew my keyboard player from Ann Arbor. And on the way home from New York gigs, we'd stop at Alice's place. He was living in Westport. And I've since done a bunch of stuff with him, but those boa constrictors that he used in the act, he didn't keep them in like big glass cages. He let them wander around freely. So when you were going to get a beer, because in those days, he doesn't drink anymore, but in those days he was a Budweiser guy. And when you went to the refrigerator to get a Budweiser, you'd have to step over the boa constrictor. Well, they were well fed. They were not dangerous. But yeah, so all those guys, man, it was it was a great time. A lot of intermingling between producers and guys who were playing with each other and everything.
I think Burt just recently passed, maybe a year or two.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because eventually, Burt Holman was the manager of the Allman Brothers, who was trained by Tim Collins, by the way. He worked in Tim Collins' office.
Really?
When Timmy put Aerosmith back together. And Burt was part of that. And so he was the perfect person to Greg when Greg had decided that he was going to make a change and kind of, not, and cut down on the intoxicants, I'll just put it that way. So, Burt took over the Allman Brothers, but when Greg did his solo stuff toward the end, he used Burt Padell. If I wanted to get in touch with Greg about a date, I'd go through Burt.
So was Burt a manager as well as an accountant?
Well, I'm thinking about Johnny Padell. That's who I'm thinking about.
Burt Padell had the whole floor.
Yeah. No, he was my accountant with Capricorn.
Wow.
Yeah, he was my accountant with Capricorn.
That's where we had the Jimmy Miller music office. And you had Butterfield and Cooper, and so it was kind of cool.
Yeah, I was thinking of Johnny Padell, who was the manager guy, but Burt Padell was my original accountant with Capricorn.
That's amazing.
And he advised us, he set us up, he advised us to not have a corporate name that was too weird, because you might be more susceptible to audit if you had a really weird corporate name. So we called it 3HM Incorporated. What we knew is that it stood for Hunga Dunga, Hunga Dunga, Hunga Dunga, and McCormick from a Groucho Marx movie, where it goes Hunga Dunga, Hunga Dunga, Hunga Dunga, and McCormick. He goes, I think you left out a Hunga Dunga. But anyway, so he was my first accountant when we signed with Capricorn.
So the next logical question is, are you going to write a book?
What's that?
Are you writing a book?
Well, I could.
I mean, Burt Padell and Johnny
yeah,
Winger.
I mean,
and the documentary.
Meeting Bruce Springsteen. The night I met Bruce Springsteen, he sold 75 tickets. I think I might have said that earlier, but and the other thing for me is that, because my band is 50 years old next year, people say, wow, you've met all these people, how does that happen? I say, just get old. By the time you get old, you've met them all, But
we've met people that people can't ever find again.
Well, that's definitely true. But for me, so for me, I like it. I got a chance to spend some time with Tom and Giselle, and I made a documentary with Morgan Freeman. I got to spend some time with him. Met George Plimpton. Spent some time with Arthur Miller, the great American playwright. Bill Lee and I are pretty close friends, and I used to hang out with Louis Tion and Bernie Carbo, and
it's a whole different world of people.
And when Bill Lee left to play, he left Boston to play in Montreal, I got a call to play his goodbye party. The call was from Phil Esposito. So, I mean, for me...
And where was the goodbye party?
What?
Where was it?
At the Cambridge Boathouse, and oh boy, it was wild. But So in other words, what I'm suggesting is that I've met a lot of people, and every single Ramones record release party in Boston happened in my apartment in Boston. My brother was their promotion director. My brother John was vice president of Sire, and also when my brother John was vice president of Warner's, and George Harrison's Dark Horse label signed with Warner Brothers, they picked my brother John to be the guy to travel on the private jet with them. So I got to spend 3 days with George Harrison.
Wow.
You know, so but for me, you know, the music people I meet, it's great. But I like to meet writers and sports guys. You know, I saw a picture of Johnny Pesky out here. He was a great guy. I got to hang with him a little bit.
Well, you have something in common with him too, because he was on this show.
What, that I'm old?
He was on this show.
Oh, he was.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm
Two
not
interviews with
surprised.
Pesky.
I'm not surprised because everybody worth anything at all has been on your show.
We just have fun, but we you know, my original idea when I was 15, I started a magazine, was to just walk down the street and interview people, ordinary people, because they all have a story.
Yeah.
But then I met Alfred Hitchcock, didn't get to interview him, but I
Wow.
met him
Wow.
at the Frenzy at the SAC 57. And I have photos
That's
of him
pretty good.
in the autograph, right? But then I remember to this day, I was 18, so it was 1972. There was a little baby, and Alfred's doing his profile.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Did he actually do that? I mean,
Yeah.
that was the beginning of the show.
it's in my magazine.
Oh, so he actually was able to do that little thing, right? Yeah, yeah.
And so we have it in Varrow Van magazine. We've got the pictures and the autograph that he made for me. But he looks up from doing his autograph and he goes, "We must put a wig on the baby's head." And he goes back to the
Oh,
signing.
my God.
He was
oh
just,
my God.
and it was Frenzy, which wasn't one of his big movies, but I got to meet Alfred.
Wow.
So, you know, this stuff
Love
is
that.
like,
Yeah.
it gets in your DNA. You remember meeting these great people.
Yeah, yeah.
And it can never happen again because they were really unique and pioneers. And you've met so many pioneers.
Yeah, and you know, I took my education seriously at BU. So when I did meet Arthur Miller, you know, we talked about Shakespeare, we talked about Ionesco and theater of the absurd, and you know, we talked about Ionesco's stage directions, and you know, and at one point we go out to his living room and he's showing me a passage and he pulls this lamp out that's like really cool looking and you can put it in any position. And I go, Arthur, these lamps, there was one on each side of the couch in the living room. And he almost begrudgingly says, he said, "Oh yeah, Calder was over here one day, you know, one of the greatest sculptors in the history of mankind, who basically invented the mobile." He says, he went out he said, "You don't have enough light in here." And he went out in the garage and came back an hour later with these two lamps, you know. But anyway, but my point is
A
that
book. I mean, the book. This
well,
is natural.
my point is, and the reason why I encourage young people to get an education isn't necessarily get a better job or make more money. It's just so that when you meet people, interesting people, people that have a story to tell, people that are creative, people that are inventive, you can say more than just, "Hey, I loved you in that movie." You know, when Morgan Freeman and I first met, we got off on a tangent about quantum physics. You know, and I come to quantum physics from the point of view of the ancient rishis who wrote the Rig Vedas like 3,000 years before Christ, the oldest scriptures known to mankind, and they talk about the relationship between energy, matter, and light. And now quantum physics is now talking about the same thing they talked about 3,000 years before Christ. So you know, so Morgan and I, the first lengthy conversation we had was about quantum physics and string theory and the God particle and the Higgs field and all that stuff. You know.
Well, did you see Lucy, the movie?
No.
Oh, you got to watch it.
What's Lucy?
It's Morgan Freeman is this professor, and
Oh, I got to see it.
Lucy just inadvertently is this boyfriend of hers somehow puts his briefcase and clamps it on her with cuffs, and it turns out to be this deadly new drug that they're trying to market around the world, and these are criminals in Asia.
Oh, okay. Don't tell me too much more because I'm going to watch it now, and I want to be surprised.
So, well, at the very beginning, you kind of know it's about getting your brain to 100% capacity. And Morgan Freeman is the professor trying to explain to students about 100% capacity of the brain.
Oh my God.
And all I'll say is that through this series of inadvertent experiences, which aren't really cool,
Yeah.
Lucy starts ascending to 20%.
Okay, I'll definitely
All right?
watch it. I'll definitely watch
I've
it.
watched it repeatedly.
Oh, really?
So you're
Okay.
talking about Morgan Freeman in quantum physics. He's actually in a film.
Well, see, the thing is, Morgan knows so much about so many things because he's narrated the whole thing, you know. He's narrated, you know, he's narrated so many scientific and natural occurrences and everything. So the guy knows everything because he's narrated, you know, the old Jay Leno joke, you know, when he had that automobile accident years ago. The Jay Leno joke was, well, you know, last night Morgan had an automobile accident, and he said his whole life flashed in front of him, and it was narrated by Morgan Freeman.
That is funny.
But that's a Jay Leno.
We've got 18 and a half minutes left, so we're going to go to the documentary at this point. And
Oh, good.
I just got to say, I don't know, we've done a few radio interviews, and we did the visual radio at the Kowloon, but I could talk to you for 6 hours.
Yeah,
James.
exactly. Yeah.
There's so much to probe in your brain here.
Yeah.
So you've made documentaries before.
I'm making two now. I was in a documentary with Morgan Freeman about Delta Blues, and with Willie Nelson and Charlie Musselwhite and a bunch of people. And but that's when I got to meet Morgan and actually hang with him. And he wanted us to come down to his place there, Ground Zero. So we went down and we did a few nights playing down there. And
He owns a club?
yeah, it's a great little.
Where is it, Ground Zero?
It's in Clarksdale. And I tell every blues fan that I know, and it took me years to do this because I used to go down to Memphis every year. And if you're a blues fan and you really want to do something, rent a car in Memphis and drive down Highway 61, which is the most amazing highway. And it's not Route 66. That's if you want to party and have fun. But if you want to feel what America's all about, take Highway 61 and Bob Dylan.
Revisited.
It's not a mistake or the reason he wrote that song Highway 61, which I used to sing play with Johnny Winter, and now I sing when I do the Johnny Winter tributes. You know,
Johnny Winter did Dylan. I'm digressing. Sorry.
Oh no, Johnny Winter on the special for Bob Dylan years and years ago. And they had all these artists coming up. It might have been Dylan's 40th birthday or whatever it was. And Johnny Winter came up with the up-tempo slide guitar version of Highway 61 and stole the show. It became a big song for him. And as a matter of fact, we kept trying to get him to play it when we were on tour, but he never would. And then one day we came up after the encore, and he started playing Highway 61. And we just jumped at, oh my God, he's playing Highway 61. We ran back on stage and did whatever, and played it. But
the documentary, I got to get you to play a little.
yeah.
But Morgan Freeman, you did a documentary with him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay.
You were-
Good. Yeah.
and then-
Start over again. Yeah. So you know, so I did a documentary with Morgan Freeman, and then I'm in one about Paul Butterfield, which is great because I modeled my first band ever. I modeled after Paul Butterfield, and then as that band grew, I stole a lot from James Cotton. So I'm in. It's called Horn from the Heart, and I'm in it briefly. But Bonnie Raitt's in it, and David Sanborn, and Al Cooper, and Jim Weeder, and a bunch of people, and then there's also a documentary they're making about my younger brother, who was a gay activist and is largely responsible for hate crime legislation and a hero in the movement. So that movie's almost done. And then I'm doing, there's another documentary I'm in. The WBCN documentary, I'm in that one too. But then, the two documentaries I'm making, one about my brother Jeff, and the other one's about James Cotton, who was, you know, my closest friend ever in the business. Before he passed, he called me son, and I called him dad. And when I would call his wife, he said, "Hey, wait a minute, your father wants to say hello." So we're making this great documentary about James Cotton. We started it years ago when Cotton was still alive. And we had Huey Lewis on stage with him, Jay Giles, the Uptown Horns, Grace Kelly, Johnny A., Barry Goudreau, you know, a former guitar player from Boston, and Kim Wilson. You know, it was a great crew. We did a 5-camera shoot at the House of Blues, and that's when we started the movie on Cotton. And then, you know, we went through a period where we were, you know, trying to make sure the release was worded correctly. And then, you know, then it's a question of fundraising, and we raised, you know, in large part thanks to a person who probably wouldn't want me to mention her name, but she was really instrumental in getting this movie started. And then, so yeah, so you know, so we filmed. We did a 5-camera shoot in a warehouse in Fall River, where we got all these people from all over the country. You know, harmonica players and people from Cotton's band, and we shot them in groups of 8, and then we moved the next group of 8. So that I've never seen it in a documentary before, where people are sitting around telling stories, and then and then he used to do this, and then we had a band behind him. And they'd start something, and then they'd play that song. And then they'd talk some more and say, oh, remember when he did this song? And then they'd play that song. And I've never seen that, but it's the coolest thing. And you know, and that was with, you know, Paul and Annie Raines, Jerry Portnoy, Kenny Neal, Curtis Salgado, Mark Hummel, you know, the list, Jerry Portnoy, the list, all the guys in Cotton's band. There were 25 blues artists, and then we did a 4-hour show. And then since then, we've interviewed Jimmy Vaughan and Steve Miller, and Cotton's wife, Jacqueline, and then we went down to Antone's in Austin and did a series of interviews down there, because that's where we were able to get Cotton buried in the Texas State Cemetery, which takes a panel of 12 to vote unanimously that you can be buried there. So it was a big deal to get him in there, and then we got Charlie Musselwhite coming up and Alvin Bishop, and then we need to raise a few $100,000. So all of you listening to this, go to.
Is it nonprofit?
Yeah,
it has to be nonprofit for us to talk about it.
Yeah, it is. It's the Real Blues Fest, REEL, because it's a combination of blues and filmmaking. So it's Real, REEL, Blues Fest, and that's a 501c3, and we're the ones who are making it. So actually, donations to the film are tax deductible.
Nice, and we are a 501c3 here.
Perfect.
And we love public access TV. So our director, Paul Norman, is a big fan of yours. Paul, you went and took the kids to see James?
At the Natick Art Center.
Oh my God! And they didn't storm out.
So
Mesmerized.
Yeah.
mesmerized. So T-Can, are you playing there again?
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned it. I'm glad you mentioned it. We're at T-Can on the 23rd of August, just coming up right around the corner.
You have a now,
Which is
you're
a
so
great
busy.
venue, by the way.
Oh,
It's
I love it.
One of the best venues in not only in New England, but in the country.
Saw the original Vanilla Fudge there.
Oh, really? No kidding.
They were doing the Vanilla Fudge album, the second album, the big hits, you know, Take Me for a Little While, Keep Me Hanging On. They do the album in its
Oh,
entirety.
yeah.
So,
yeah, I forgot about that.
Great guys,
Yeah.
great band. I adore them. I saw them at the Regent Theater too. So T-Can, you go to the Regent and you see a movie theater, and then you go to T-Can and you see an intimate club where you can buy chocolate chip cookies and coffee.
And red wine, let's not forget that.
Oh, well, see, I like the coffee and the chocolate chip cookies when I go to a concert.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing about T-Can for me. The Left Bank I saw there too. Walk
Oh,
Away,
really?
Renee.
Don't walk away, Renee, exactly.
So it is a beautiful place. It's in Natick, of course, so you have to go out, Route 9 or the Pike?
Well, either way, you end up on Route 27 somehow. I think it's 27 that runs through Natick.
And I go out there, and I still can't find the place I have
Well,
to. Yeah. You need your GPS.
It takes it takes 1 or 2 trips, but there's a little Italian place around the corner that's mostly all to go. So,
Well, Danny Klein would call it Bluesheimers on my part.
Yeah,
That's what we called
yeah.
it, Bluesheimers. Could you play a little?
Absolutely.
I liked when you were.
At the risk of losing your audience, I will play a little bit.
Nah, James, it's visual radio. I'm glad we're doing. We've been doing half-hour shows. I'm glad we're getting back to the hour show because there's so much to discuss,
Yeah.
and people will love this show. This is fun.
There we go. So I'll start with something like this.
Awesome. Awesome. Remember being on the cover of Musicians magazine back in the day?
I was, and I
Black
had,
and white cover. You had like a
I
dark
had,
coat.
Yeah, it looked like I was a flasher. I was wearing a,
You did. You looked like
and that was on purpose, by the way.
Bill Taylor, right?
But I had a big mustache in those days. And it's when I saw my picture on the front of Musicians magazine that I decided to shave my mustache.
It was all.
I said, "Oh, I look like that. I think I'm shaving that," you know.
I ran the back column for years,
Yeah.
but it was Nancy Foster, who was the editor of Super Rock and 15 Fever national magazines.
Oh yeah.
Was her picture, and I considered the critic was the illegitimate daughter of Lou Reed and Janis Joplin's tryst that never happened. So we named her Janice Reed. And guys were sending me love letters because they saw beautiful Nancy Foster, this national critic, her picture, and I'm the one doing the writing. So
yeah.
we put Janice on vacation for 2 issues, and P.J. Blaine was the writer. We were getting letters.
I remember PJ.
So they were getting letters. Yeah, well, I was P.J. and I was Janice. Okay.
You were PJ because I remember that. Remember the name in the byline.
So it was like, we hate Janice Reed. We love P.J. Blaine. It was great. I mean, and then Steve Morse at the Globe and Rory O'Connor. Rory's still a dear friend. They exposed Janice in the paper, in the Globe, and in
Oh
the
my
Real.
God.
So, but you're on the cover. I'm on the back cover.
I still have that somewhere.
Yeah, so now you can read my column and see if
I will.
trashed-
I'll go home and read it.
Did I
Yeah.
trash James Montgomery? I probably did because
You
we
probably
trashed
did.
everyone. It was awesome.
Yeah, like
was-
Dwayne Glasscock, right?
It was fun. It was an era. You had Janice Reed and Dwayne Glasscock and all these people.
Yeah, everyone had their alter egos.
And Charles Great, he plays some of our artists on his
Yeah, well,
radio
he's
show.
coming. You know, we're doing a special screening of the BCN documentary at the Regent movie theater in the old Sears building off of Brookline Avenue.
That's not the Regent. That's
It's called something like that though now.
Paul and I went to see Aquaman there.
Is it the Regal?
The Regal.
Oh, the Regal.
I
That's
took
what
him
it
to
is.
see Aquaman.
The Regal, yeah. It's the old, it's the old Sears building, and then John Caron, who owns West End Johnny's outside of the Garden, also has another Johnny's outside of Fenway.
Okay.
On Brookline Avenue. So we have a big film screening, and then my band is playing afterwards. That's on the 4th of December.
Oh, nice.
And so, and all the BCN jocks are coming in, Charles Lacquadera and everybody. So it'll be a great time for people to go through that nostalgic period again.
Well, it was a wonderful time. Like I said, it was very different. And
Yeah.
I remember going down to the Stone Phoenix Coffee House. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, absolutely.
You go down, 2 flights of stairs down, and there was Jonathan Richman with Andy Paley on drums.
Yeah, and then the Catacombs was also like 2 or 3 stories down, and that's what I used to see. Jay Giles there when Peter Wolf was still a DJ, and then Charlie Musselwhite played there when
Jay Giles Blues Band with Danny and Magic,
yeah,
the three of them. the
Yeah,
trio.
right. And then Wolf would come and sit in, and then
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
yeah, he was a DJ and he started sitting in with them, and eventually, you know,
But he had the Hallucinations band.
right. But when he started playing with the Jay Giles band, he was a DJ on BCN too, and you know, I mean, I don't. These were great players, and I have so much tremendous respect for Seth Justman, and who's also one of the most knowledgeable baseball player I know.
Really?
And of course, you know, Magic Dick's still one of the top 5 best harmonica players on the planet, and I certainly don't put myself in his class.
That is
But,
indeed praise.
But what's that? But Peter
praise.
Wolf really was the catalyst for that band to really take off, you know.
And he's so genuine walking down the street. We were hanging out with John Lincoln right at the Middle
John
East.
Lincoln.
Yeah, we did 2 hours with John.
Yeah, he's still in my prayers every day.
Great guy, sweetheart.
Still in my prayers every day.
And so Peter's so down to earth, you would never know he's a rock star. He gets on stage and he changes, metamorphosis.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not the person you were talking to on the street corner.
No, I think all of us who front bands are like that. I wish I was the James Montgomery who gets on stage. That guy is fearless. That guy has no fear. This one here, I have some fears.
When you're up in this area, we got to do this again. There's so much to talk about, if you want.
Yeah.
This has been a blast, and we've got 2.5 minutes left.
Yeah.
Anything you want to discuss other than your upcoming shows, if you want?
Well, you know,
Website?
Yeah, my website needs to be updated, but my real biography is on Wikipedia because that's got more on it than is on my website.
Ah,
But yeah, no, I just, you know, I'd like to, you know, just thank all the people that have supported me over the years, and by, you know, agents and managers, of course, and band members, but more importantly, the fans who've come out to see me play over the years. You know, I can't go anywhere in New England and sit down and not have someone come up and thank me for a performance. And it means a lot to me. You know, if it wasn't for people supporting me and coming to see me play and buying my records and CDs, I might not be able to play music for a living. And, you know, I always say I play music for free. I get paid to drive to and from gigs and sit in traffic and to sit at home at my desk for 4 hours a day and run the band because I have an agent and a publicist and the whole thing. But if I'm not on the phone 4 or 5 hours a day, my schedule doesn't look as good as it should. So, you know, I just want to thank those people for giving me the opportunity to play music for free and get paid to drive to and from my gig.
this has been a fascinating hour. Sorry to hear about Jose from the Buddy Guy Band. He was such a great guy.
Great guy. You know, I'll give it a 99% on that. I'm not.
Then we'll dedicate this show to Jose, even if,
We will.
if he's still alive.
Even
that'd
if
be
he's still
wonderful.
alive, yeah.
But he's always, we went to Procol Harum Buddy Guy or something like that. Or maybe it was some show down on the South Shore. We had just had a blast. He's just a cool guy.
Yeah. You know, like I say, by the time I was 19, I had played with John Lee Hooker, James Cotton, Buddy Guy, Junior Wells, who was also a teacher. Junior Wells.
Love Junior.
And James Cotton were my teachers.
And we've got 25 seconds left. So James Montgomery, T-Can, and
T-Can on the 23rd, but you know, verify that. And
WBCN party December 4th.
BCN, yeah, and then but there's a bunch of stuff besides that. Get on the website.
And that's our show, Visual Radio. Thank you, Paul Norman. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you,
and
Paul. Thank you, Paul.
WCAT. Have a good one.